Well, it was an eventful day in Berea today, starting with the official news that Kevin Stefanski is out as head coach of the Cleveland Browns. We will react to it with you here as part of our Browns Roundtable YouTube channel content. It's Spencer German, it's Anthony Moeglin with you. Plenty to talk about on our latest episode of the pod. But first, use that QR code that just popped up on your screen there. You can scan it. You can go to our website. You can join our space there. We have a community section where you can jump in and chime in with your own topics, or if you want to talk about potential coaching candidates for the Browns, throw it in the community section. You can also comment on other stuff. I put a video up of Joel Bitonio basically crying. Like it's a great time. We have a bunch of written content up there for you as well, and there's a ton of stuff to get to from today. So make sure you join our space, and also if you haven't done so already, subscribe to this YouTube channel where we got you covered with all things Cleveland Browns all the time. Press conferences from this week, and we'll have those throughout the offseason. And our weekly podcast, which you're listening to right at this very moment. But Megs, a lot to get to, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think we got to start with the fact that, of course, we kind of knew it was coming. Like this had been in the purview in our conversation for several weeks now, that Kevin Stefanski was kind of in danger here with the way the season had gone. You wondered if how the team finished the season, winning the last two in emotional fashion over two division rivals, and you win the last one in particular on like a walk-off field goal, if that would help his case. In the end, it didn't. And I didn't think it would, because I think Jimmy Haslam has tried to really get away from just making like the emotional decisions based off of one or two games. But, I think we kind of prepared for this, but it's always a weird thing, especially, for me, like showing up at the facility and realizing, man, like Kevin Stefanski's gone. He's been a figurehead of this organization for 6 years. I think some of the general thoughts that I felt throughout the day were that the organization thinks very glowingly of Kevin, and that this was a tough decision, which was something that Jimmy Haslam brought up. It just kind of, for them, felt like it was time.
Yeah, it felt like it was time, and you just kind of needed a new voice in there. And, I've said it several times on this show. I think for about 16 weeks this year, I was like, don't fire him. And then once it got to the end, and, I've said it 100 times, like he's on the sidelines, he's not calling plays, doesn't have a play sheet in his hands, kind of walking around, and the team's still making those mistakes, right? Like if the team was a clean operating team, if special teams was good, if they weren't jumping off sides, if they were lining up right, and if they were competing in these games, I think we have a different story on our hands. But it was almost like, all right, it's kind of soured at this point, and it's unfortunate, man. And you shared that sentiment. I've listened to a bunch of stuff today on it, and Nathan Zagura from Cleveland Browns Daily, he does the radio voice of the Browns, and he was walking in as Kevin was kind of walking out, and they shared a moment with each other, and he's like, yep, Kevin's going to get in his car, and he's never coming back to this facility ever again. And I thought, like, the finality of it all is always fascinating and weird at some points. But I thought what was interesting and unique to this one, Spence, and I'm curious your perspective on it. Like, this was not a mutual breakup, but this was like a breakup where it was like, all right, Kevin got to like release a statement. Everybody released statements. The Browns put out on social like a thank you video to Kevin. And it was like a very, I don't know the right word to say. It just kind of felt odd. Like all these other firings in the league are all bad. And this one's like, yep, you just didn't win enough games. You're a great guy. You did all the right things. It's just, we need something new. And it felt like everybody was kind of on that same page.
You know what I thought was maybe one of the more poignant moments of the day was we were talking to Joe Bitonio, not that moment from Joe Bitonio. We'll get to that, but a different line from Joe Bitonio. It was actually his first answer, asked to sort of just reflect on Kevin's firing, especially after what he said a couple weeks ago, advocating for Kevin to keep the job. He had a line in his first answer where he said, "Greatest sport in the world, tough business." And I think that really does encapsulate the situation here, right? Like the NFL is awesome, and there's so much for us as fans and consumers, but also like for the people who are part of it and who are part of that world. And play the games and there's this brotherhood feeling, and you build such relationships and with coaches and players and across the board. And Kevin clearly did a lot of that and left a mark. So you sense that in the walls of that facility today, and you understand that all kind of comes with it. But at the end of the day, like, none of that matters if you win 8 games in 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's ultimately like the bottom line here in all this, as we've talked about a bunch of times. This came down to results. Yeah. And that's it's a results-based business. And I think Kevin understands that. I'm not saying he wanted to get fired. I'm not saying he agrees with it. But I think Kevin does understand, like, when you lose as many games as they've lost the last 2 years, like, anything's fair game. Like, and you know what you're signing up for. So we'll play this clip here from Jimmy Haslam real quick. But I think he spoke to that, the idea that the record the last couple of years is not acceptable. And that's ultimately what I think this decision came down to. Let's play that clip, and then I do want to hear more of your reaction on, like, that part of it and the, like, why this is happening now type thing.
First of all, ownership takes full responsibility for where we are. To win 8 games in 2 years is horrible. It's totally unacceptable, okay? And it's not going to continue, okay? And I want the fans to know we are as frustrated as you are, and we hear a lot from our fans, which we actually appreciate. We have great fans. They're extremely passionate, and they deserve better than what they've gotten the last 2 years, okay? No, I don't need to say anything else. We are going to give you a better product. Our sole goal here is to be a consistent winner, not make the playoffs in 20 and then make it again in 23, not win 8 games in 2 years. That's not what we're trying to do. That's not acceptable. Our fans deserve better.
Yeah, and I think, well, first of all, there's a lot that I think to unpack there, because I think a lot of fans feel like they've heard this messaging from Jimmy Haslam before, and nothing's changed. But I also think, like, that does, speak to, and it was similar comments from Andrew Berry, like the idea that, like, this decision was made with the idea that we know we need to be better, and that's what we're thinking about here as we make this move.
Yeah, it's the hard part too is you and I, because early on I was banging the drum pretty hard, like, they're so close, but that's also the NFL, right? They win 5 games, okay, and this comes from Tom Withers, and he tweeted this out earlier today. But if you make that field goal in week 1, you win number 6. If you stop Carson Wentz and Denzel Ward plays his coverage, that's win number 7. If you just tackle one of the Jets' 2 kick returns, that's win number 8. And if you somehow stop the worst team in the league, the Tennessee Titans, that's win number 9. And guess what? The AFC North was won with 10 wins on a walk-off missed field goal. That was almost a 9-win division. It's like, okay, this certainly was never going to be a Super Bowl contending team. They know that. Andrew Berry talked about it, and I thought his press conference was, like, really insightful for a group of guys who've gotten so used to saying nothing at all. Like, I think he opened up a little bit and talked about a lot of stuff, and I encourage you guys to go watch it. It's on the channel. But it's like the NFL is so close, and you live and lose, or you live and die on the margins. And yeah, it goes to exactly what Joel said. Like, this is a tough business. And I think what's been really cool today, and what's really the unfortunate part, is, like, when you got to interview a lot of guys, you didn't get everyone, but, like, all the clips that are bouncing around the Twitter and all of social, like, DeJuan Jones was, like, almost in tears. He's like, yeah, Kevin means a lot to me because he was there for me and on all of my injuries. Shelby Harris shared something similar. Jameis Winston in New York shared something very similar, like how good of a guy Kevin is. And unfortunately, you can be the best guy in the world, and I'm sure that he is. I never got to meet him or talk to him or whatever. But you got to win football games, right? You got this. This isn't about, treating people nice. This is about winning football games. And Kevin knows that, like you said. And that's just frankly, the shitty part of it all. And, it's a beautiful sport and a tough business.
Yeah, I think that's all well said. You get the sense that guys in that locker room, did feel for Kevin, and that they built some really strong relationships. And I do think in general, Kevin had changed the culture here. I'm not saying it's completely fixed or that it's completely on the trajectory that, like Jimmy Haslam alluded to, that they want it to be on. They want to build a culture of consistent winning, is what Jimmy Haslam said. But, like, from where the organization was prior to, I think the culture is better than it was back then. I think that's probably fair to say. And I'm not saying that's a reason to retain a guy, but I think, he did change some things here in Cleveland, and that's notable at the very least.
Spence, you know what I take away from all of like the guys talking about him, and even the post game clips that we see. Like I really do wish, and him and Andrew operated very similarly. And this is going to go. We'll play this in a little bit, but like those two were kind of like lockstep, right? Where they did everything together, and they approached the media the same exact way, where they just said nothing. They just were all coach speak all the time. And I really wish we got the opportunity to like learn his his personality and stuff, because all these players speak glowingly about him. You see him in these post game, after they win, and he's just hyped up. He's he looks like he's one of the guys are like pushing him around. And then he comes out to the podium. And when you guys talk to him, he's like, "Yep, good game, team sport, do the right things, make their adjustments, got to coach better," all that stuff. It's like, man, I wish he could like have unleashed his personality a little bit, like you're seeing with Ben Johnson in Chicago, you see with Dan Campbell in Detroit, and you even see it with like Sean McVay and even Kyle Shanahan to an extent, where like they don't hide behind coach speak. They'll say it, they'll take accountability. Leon Cohn, another example, talking about how he made some bad calls and stuff, like how he's going to change his approach. And it's like, damn, you just wish that he opened up a little bit more and wasn't just a robot to protect up from a mistake. You wish you got to learn him a little bit. And I think the fans would have a much different perspective of him than they do right now as he's walking out the door.
I wish he was like that, because I just want to hear some of the stories about things that he didn't agree with, or whatever. Like what happened with the Deshaun trade. I'd love some of those stories. I think we all would.
And I think even like, and that's big picture stuff, right? Like that's a big picture thing. I'd like to know, like, hey, why did you go for it on fourth down, or what was the thought process on where did Dylan miss this throw, or Shador miss that throw, or how did Shador make that throw, instead of like, oh, good preparation, or where did it go wrong?
Yeah. Well, and I want to be clear too. Like, I don't want this to be like a memorializing of Kevin Stefanski, because like I've been saying it probably is time for change in this organization. So I think it's fair that they want to move on from him, and I think he has to kind of wear the record and all those things. Where my biggest gripe is, and we talked about this in the post-game show on Sunday, is I have a hard time understanding how Kevin gets fired when the organization is a mess for other things beyond anything that's in his control. Mm-hmm. I'm again on the on-field results, not there. His offense lost the plot. Like the offense that he was running early on here was not the same this year. He had to give play calling twice, like you mentioned. But at the same time, like, I think how much of that was, maybe he just needs a fresh start, and he kind of lost what his identity was, and how much of that was, well, I didn't have the players to execute what I wanted to do. Yeah. And as I think about that big picture question, that's where Andrew Berry comes into the frame here, because what Berry gave Kevin Stefanski this year for a roster, not defensively, we know defensively they're very good, but what he gave him to work with on the offensive side of the football was trash, frankly. Like the offensive line's a mess. There's no depth there because they haven't been able to draft and develop anybody. The receiving core is a mess, and your best receiver had a terrible year, was dropping a lot of passes. And then your quarterback room, you had four guys that you were sort of trying to sort through, and did you start Shador too late? Like, there's all these different questions, and maybe that's where Kevin Stefanski also went wrong. But at the same time, like, he was trying to navigate that thing the best he probably thought he could. I'm not going to sit here and say like he got a raw deal. Like, again, it's all part of the business. It's what you signed up for. But I have a hard time letting this all be pinned on Kevin. Is my point. And that's not me being like, oh, woe is me, Kevin got fired. That's so unfair. I'm not saying it's unfair he got fired, because again, that's the NFL. You don't win games, you're always susceptible to get fired. Right. And I think it's warranted that they want to change something, and that they are making this change. I just think for it to stop at Kevin is where I kind of feel the organization is maybe not thinking this thing all the way through. Yeah. And I'll say this real quick, Max. I wonder if they're afraid to go that far, and basically, because if you get rid of everybody, if you clean house, you're basically saying like,
trade everybody.
We're starting over, and I think there's like, I think that's maybe what's at the core of this is like, I think they're afraid to do that and sort of accept, we're in this rebuild mode and guys could get traded and whatever, and we're starting all the way over from the bottom again. I think that's maybe the thing that they're running from here by keeping Andrew Berry around.
I think that's a really good point. Because they just don't want to admit defeat, right? You bring Miles back. Miles is untradeable at this point. Like you can't, like it's not like you're going to require a haul back for him, and it'd probably be worth it. But like you said, if they were to start it over, you'd strip it all the way down. I don't know. It felt like dirty almost today, like listening to Jimmy talk about, all right, Andrew's going to lead the coach search.
Yeah.
And
let me real quick. I don't mean to cut you off. I was going to read real quick, what Jimmy said about why Andrew's still here. And all these things are valid, but I also just thought it was like it was basically him saying like, yeah, Andrew saved his job because of the last year, or Carson Schlesinger saved his job. Here's what he said. He said, I think Andrew over the last year has done a very good job. And I want to go through that because I think it's important to talk about the moves he made to strengthen the team. I think it began with what I would call a very efficient free agency. We added one player, and that player made substantial difference in our football team, and that was Malik Collins. Malik is not only a really good player, but he's a really good person who was a leader on our defense, a leader in the defensive line room. Andrew negotiated a trade a week or two before the draft started, in which he added 3 draft picks, 2 last year, a second and a fourth and a fifth, and the first this year. Then I think we had one of the better drafts that we've ever had. I think we added 4 really good football players who are either first team all rookie or second team all rookie. And I think Carson has a really good chance to be the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think that's important to understand about our rookies, though. And you see them all, you know them all. They're all really good players. They're all really good people, and they will have to be they will be the cornerstone with which we'll build and grow and develop this winning team. So he essentially highlighted what we've talked about for weeks, right? Andrew Berry is in line to be safe because the draft that he had last year basically saved his job.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm naive in this, or maybe I'm wrong in this, but like I think a lot. Honestly, I think a lot of that's valid too. Like I think that I do think that what they did, the Andrew Schmidt part is fine, or Andre Schmidt part is whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, but I didn't get to that part, but he did bring up Andre Schmidt,
he signed
which kind of honestly, and this is not that I love Andre Schmidt. It kind of also ignores the fact that like they thought they found their kicker a year earlier and gave him a 3-year contract extension, and then that didn't work out. So it's he found a kicker, but honestly, that sums up the entire Andrew Berry experience. It's like, yeah, you can point to all these things he did in the last year that you feel really good about. We had this great draft trade, and now we got 2 firsts this year, and we found a kicker, and we found these great rookies. But like, does that erase the previous 5 years where you drafted and developed no offensive line depth? Mm-hmm. You couldn't hit on receivers to save your life. You still don't have a quarterback, and the quarterback that you tied yourself to is a complete disaster.
Yeah.
Like, does that erase all that?
Yeah, but then it goes back to the first thing you said of like fear of, hey, if we're getting rid of both, we're starting all the way over.
Yeah.
And are they in a position to start over? Or do they think that this window that they're in, if they get a quarterback that can just be, I feel like they're fishing for like Brock Purdy, right? And I think everyone's kind of doing that in some sense of the word, but like, honestly, like, they're not going to be able to draft the next guy. And if they do draft a guy, you're 3 years away from him being legit, or 2 years away from being legit. And then you put all the pieces around him, and then you go. But like, Miles is 33 at that point, or 34. Like, I don't know, man. It's a really, like, this roster's in a weird spot. And that's the frustrating part is, you look at a defense that's generational in a lot of ways, and they're going to be like 8-50 by the time that this like group is done. And it sucks, man. It's just frustrating. And, at the end of the day, the players are the ones that have to suffer, and the fans are the ones that have to suffer through it all, because, this is a quarterback league, unfortunately, and the Browns just haven't had one. That list is long. That list from Baker on till now is long. And, that's the main portion of it.
Well, I think all that underscores again, like, if you were going to do the rebuild thing, last year was kind of the year to do it.
Last year was the year to do it.
When Miles was out here saying trade me, and I understand, like I've said this before,
man. Oh my God,
Barry couldn't do it. Like, he could not trade Miles because his legacy is then I made the worst trade in NFL history, and I ran out of town the second greatest player in franchise history. Like that just can't happen. So We don't have to revisit all that, but I think it does underscore like now you are kind of in this awkward spot where trying to run it back now after you re-upped with Myles Garrett and whatever doesn't make a lot of sense. You could have done this last year and it would have been a different story. But
dude,
regardless,
hindsight's always 2020. Like
yeah.
if the Patriots were actually giving them 3 first-round picks, bro, I mean, it would have been the 30th pick, but you'd have your pick, the Jaguars pick, and the Patriots pick. Whatever.
Who knows? Who knows what could have been? The next part of this conversation though was like, what should the next coach look like, be like, philosophically want to do? And there's some interesting debates here because I don't know that I don't think right now, Megs, we have to do like I like this guy and like throw out names that like we think make the most sense right now. I think that's another conversation for another pod episode later. But I think from a standpoint of, philosophically where the Browns should go, and we will get into one candidate who's an internal guy here in a second as well, but it's this weird push and pull where do you hire a defensive minded coach because the defense right now for the Browns is very much like set it and forget it, and it can just kind of go out there and do its thing, and somebody else can come in and focus on the offense, and you can get the right coordinator in here, and you feel good about it? Or do you go get the offensive guy because that's the trend in the NFL, and because that unit needs so much help, they can come in with a fresh perspective and say, we're going to build this offense this way. We're going to find our quarterback, and then the hope is you have this coach and this quarterback paired together forever without risking losing that guy as a coordinator to a defensive-minded head coach every couple years because, he goes and gets a head coaching job. That's kind of the push and pull here. I'm curious your thoughts on like what direction you think the Browns should go in terms of that part of it, like philosophically.
Yeah, I think philosophically speaking, like I think that's the right move. And we've seen it now in Cleveland these past couple of years. Like Jim Schwartz has been the captain of this defense that's been top.
Wait, I'm sorry. You think going offensive guy is the
yes.
Okay.
Let me explain. Let me explain because I look at Jim Schwartz now, who's been the leader of this defense for the last 3 years, and they're a top 10 defense in the league, right? And he stayed put. Robert Saleh tried the head coaching job. He went back to defensive coordinator. Like these defensive coordinators, they become successful and they like stay, and they could stay. They're more likely to stay because everyone's so infatuated with the offensive side. So that's why I agree with what you're saying. Like get the offensive guy right. Get him with a quarterback that they can grow together and become a pairing that you can envision 5-10 years down the road. And then if you do find, hey, you can get Jim Schwartz for 3-4 years, great. And then you got to go find the next coordinator 3-4 years. And then you can do that. But we were talking about this before we recorded. Just go look down to Tampa Bay, right? That's been like the head coach hotbed where everyone, like Baker's had like 5 offensive coordinators just in his time at Tampa because they all come in, they do well with him, they get head coaching jobs, and they're out because everyone wants that next Sean McVay, that next Kyle Shanahan, and that's what they're on the quest to find. I think that you got to do that. That's got to be the priority and the prerogative that you take into this head coaching search. Get the offensive guy, and then let the rest fall into place.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. And we know there's a handful of defensive-minded coaches out there. Sean McDermott's one. He's had obviously a lot of success. Obviously, Mike Tomlin's one. We know the success that he's had. Mike Vrabel, who I know there's a lot of people lamenting letting him leave. He's one. Mike McDonald, who he just led the Seahawks to the 1 seed this year. So it works. It's possible. But like Mike McDonald's actually a perfect example because he might lose his OC this year.
Yep.
And Clint Kubiak, who's now kind of a candidate for some of these jobs. Yeah. He might come to Cleveland for all we know. Real quick, this was Andrew Berry. I think I asked him this question, not to toot my own horn, but this was him. Yeah. His response to like what he's looking for. It was a good question, by the way. Yeah, what he's looking, what he thinks is important in the next season.
So I'd say number one, like you hit it. Like it's not just leadership by position, but I'd say leadership more globally. Because when you hire a head coach, it's someone who has to be able to lead your players, lead your staff, lead the organization, lead through hardship and lead through crisis. And NFL years, they're like dog years. They're really difficult seasons. And that'll be at the forefront because it's first and foremost a leadership position. And then when I say partnership, head coach GM relationship is a lot like a marriage. And you have to work side by side and, fight back to back. And I think that that's really, really important because you have to be aligned in terms of how you're positioning the team.
So two things here. Like when you talked about leadership, I thought it was kind of funny because I do think he was describing Kevin Stefanski. But like, that is obviously a quality you're looking for, somebody who's a good leader. He got into with some of his other answers, like the offensive mind versus defensive mind. They're not going to like discriminate one way or another, I think is fair. The other part of that I thought was interesting though was, the line about the GM head coach relationship is like a marriage. Yeah. And I think what's key in that is we see a lot of times where a coach gets fired, GM gets to pick the coach. And then within a year, the GM's getting fired because the head coach wants to pick his own GM. So this process is going to be fascinating to see who ends up as the coach, who Andrew Berry sort of handpicks as this guy, and are they actually aligned? Because, we've seen those relationships deteriorate where it then goes the other direction the next year. Yeah. And I think there is a lot of pressure on him to find the right guy that works with him, but also that can be the sort of blade, the guiding light for the organization moving forward.
Yeah, and I say it a bunch on this show, right? I think the Chicago Bears are like what they're trying to do here. They're trying to be what Chicago did, what Chicago became, and similar situation. Ryan Poles was the GM brought in with Eberflus. Eberflus kind of fizzled out after one good season. And now, Poles goes and hires Ben Johnson and they win the NFC North. And it's like, okay, like that's kind of the model you're looking for.
So who's Andrew Berry's Ben Johnson is essentially what they're looking for, right?
They're essentially looking for that, but also who's Andrew Berry and their Ben Johnson's Caleb Williams, right? Because that's part of it, right? Where it's like the thing we can't get lost in, and this is probably for another episode of like, this is not an attractive job at all. Zero. This is going to be the least attractive position out there. And that's goes again to the fact that, hey, you better be sure that firing Kevin was right, because you better upgrade from that. And your list, whatever you see on social media, I'm going to disagree with, because there's not going to be a list of top candidates who are like, I want to go to Cleveland. That Cleveland looks great. They have no quarterback. They got Deshaun Watson on an $80 million cap hit next year.
They're not picking in the top 2 or 3. They're picking sixth.
Yeah. They don't have an ability to trade up.
They do have 2 first rounders. That
is positive, but your best receivers, Jerry Jeudy, who led the league in drops, and Malachi Corley, who you got in week whatever they got him in. And it's like, what's attractive? They do have a great rookie class and a great defense. Certainly, I hear that. But like, hey, there's a lot of things, and whatever Jimmy Haslam's perception is out there, you're going to be battling that too. And so it's like, you got to be sure, you got to be damn sure that you're going to get somebody good. And that's kind of where I like get uncomfortable about the whole thing.
Well, this is where I think we pivot a little bit to one of the candidates that I think is already getting some buzz because he's internal, and it's Jim Schwartz. The idea that, he's already here. He has a pulse in the organization. We sort of talked earlier about, are they afraid to, reset everything? And if they're running from that and they're trying to have some continuity here, it's not a terrible idea if that's your goal to maybe stick with somebody who's in the organization already. And like I said, the defense is set it and forget it. You don't have to worry about that unit with him. He can just kind of come in, still, have a major hand in the defense, but also know like they know what they're kind of doing. They'll be okay. And then like do all the head coaching things that he has to do. And then it just becomes about like picking the right OC and finding that quarterback and all those things. Real quick, I'll play first. This is Andrew Berry talking about him. And actually he was asked about Tommy Rees too and mentioned Tommy Rees. And then I want to play at least one player reaction we have in here to the idea of Jim Schwartz being the head coach. We'll play Berry here first.
So first with Jim, Jim's an outstanding football coach. We have a lot of respect for him, a lot of appreciation for him, and he has certainly earned the right for consideration. But that's something that we still have to discuss and obviously discuss with him. And Tommy, he's a very talented young coordinator. He's held in very high regard, not just in college football, but across the NFL. But again, those are discussions that we have to continue to have.
Will you require the new coach to keep anybody on the staff, whether Jim or Tommy?
I'll touch what I said a little bit earlier. Ultimately, that'll be the head coach's prerogative. Obviously, we'll have a number of discussions about the existing staff, but that'll be the head coach's prerogative.
So 2 key answers there. in terms of like those two guys as potential options, but also the idea that they won't require a new head coach to keep one of them around, which is also interesting because Jimmy Haslam at the end of his press conference was asked like, do you want Jim Schwartz to be here? And he was like, absolutely, he's a great coach. But it sounds like they're not going to require that of anybody new, which is honestly that you have to do that. You can't force a marriage between like, hey, if you come here, you got to keep Jim Schwartz. That can't happen. So I don't know, Megs, like before we get to Denzel, we're talking about Jim Schwartz. What are your thoughts on Jim as a potential option here to replace Kevin Stefanski?
Yeah, I hear like the thought of, hey, you want to keep some continuity, but isn't the whole point of firing Kevin Stefanski to not do that, you know? And it's like, I think he runs a solid defense. I think he's really aided by some elite players on that side. Obviously Miles, obviously Carson Schlesinger and JOK in the past, Denzel Ward. You've had great safeties. You've really had really good players on defense. I think schematically, like I think his defense can get got. We've seen it several times, right? They've gotten diced up a couple times this year. It's a very easy defense to really scheme up and attack. But when your players are good enough, it looks good, you know, and you do have, you know, some of those great performances. So like from an X's and O's standpoint on it.
So you think like they can find somebody who can still get something? You think that not that he'd be like Jim Schwartz level good, but like you think they could find a DC or whatever who can have at least, you know, the success required by a defense to win football games, even if it's not the elite level play that we've seen, because the players are already in place on this defense. That's
I lean more to that. I look to, you know, a couple of the games this year. You give up 40 plus. You know, the Patriots go for 32 on you. The Lions go for 34 on you. The Ravens go for 41 on you. Like, it's not consistent. 49ers go for 26. The Titans was kind of the more outstanding one where
that was the bad stretch of the season for them.
It's a really bad stretch. And you know, the reasons were you got some guys hurt and you lose Malik Collins up front, like you lose key pieces. How can you overcome that? And schematically, you can't. And that's not to say he's bad, but I'm not just going to sit here and say that he's like all worldly. Hey, you'll never get another guy like that. I don't think that part's true. Also, too, like from a head coaching perspective, he's done this before. His career record, he was the head coach for the Detroit Lions, 29 and 51. Right, it was 29 and 51. You know, we talk about this being a wins and losses business. That's his resume, right? Whether you like it or not, whether you hate it or like it. That's his resume. And it's like, okay, I certainly take the interview, see what he has to say. I would not want to hire internally for this position. And certainly I think Jim's an awesome defensive coordinator. He's been so good here, but I don't know that, like, if it were me, I don't know that that's the direction I would take.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. I tend to agree that, like, if you go internal, are you just kind of staying too close to what you just were?
Yeah.
And I think if the point here is to find something different, Jim doesn't really accomplish that. Now, that doesn't mean he's not a good coach. I do like the idea of, like, you know what you're going to get from him. You know what the defense is going to look like. That unit kind of takes care of itself, especially if he's still here. But I do think the thing that creeps into my mind is what we talked about earlier, like the idea that you lose your OC every year because you might do well enough, and then what are you doing for your offense and your potentially your quarterback that you find? Now, that doesn't mean my opinion matters all that much. The player's opinion might matter more, and there was a lot of endorsements of Jim Schwartz as a coach. Here was what Denzel Ward had to say.
Personally, I have so much love and respect for Coach Schwartz. I would highly recommend Coach Schwartz for a head coaching job here. Definitely, like I said, Coach Schwartz, he's a great coach. He's helped my game tremendously. Puts us in great position, great leader, and I can't say enough great things about him. But I think he's a guy that when you want in a coach and somebody to lead a team, and I know he's a guy. He's a great guy.
Can I say this? Jim Schwartz feels like the guy that they like. It almost feels like they should have fired Kevin like mid-season
and just
let Jim Schwartz do it, and then like let that be his audition.
Yeah.
And if the team played a lot better down the stretch and they maybe won more games than 5 or something, maybe then you're like, he's our guy. I think it's a little awkward to fire him at the end of the season, then be like, we're just going to go with somebody who was already on the staff. That's I think where my head's kind of at with it.
It goes to kind of what I said there. Like, the whole point of firing Kevin was to clean out you need a new voice in there. It's like, I don't know.
And I do think it's a different voice. We hear so much about Jim and like the energy he brings and like the no loafing and all that in place. So I think there's a different energy there than what Stefanski brought. But I also think it's probably still like too close to home when it comes to what you just are trying to get rid of. So I get that as well. A couple other things we want to get to. And I think the last really big one here was what Andrew Berry had to say when it came to the quarterback position, because I know this is a hotly debated topic and everybody wants to believe that Shedeur Sanders might be the future quarterback for this franchise. He certainly has a lot of supporters out there who believe that he's done enough to win the job for next year. But Andrew Berry pretty much made it clear that the organization isn't ready to commit to him yet. Let's play these comments. These are pretty telling comments, I think, about the state of that position specifically and how the team's approaching it. So we'll talk about it on the other side.
I think we saw a lot of progress with Shedeur this year. I think that's both mentally, physically, playing the position. He's still very much a work in progress, like many rookie quarterbacks are. But I think we saw some really good things in terms of his playmaking, his accuracy, his ability to extend with his feet. And I think I'd also give him credit, as well as our offensive staff, for bringing him along in terms of his pocket management, his situational awareness and things of that nature. Now, that all being said, we're going to do our work on the quarterback market. It's too important of a position, and it's something that has to be solidified. I can't sit here and tell you today, whether the solution or the starter in 2026 is internal or external, but it's something that we're going to work through over the next several weeks. And quite honestly, the new head coach will also have a lot of input into that as well.
I think the lines where first of all, I think he encapsulated very eloquently the truth on Shedeur Sanders. There was a lot of growth. There was a lot of reason for optimism. There was a lot of things that they liked about his progress this season, but he's still a rookie quarterback, young quarterback that needs some time to develop. And he made it clear, like, that's a lot of young quarterbacks. It's okay. But at the same time, I think that line at the end there where it was like, I can't sit here today and tell you if the answer is going to be internal, external, and the new coach will have a lot of say in that. Those two things tell me, listen, they are keeping all options open here. They are committing to no one. They're not making any, declarative statements on it's Shedeur. He's going to have a chance to win the job. They're not saying anything right now. They're going to let the chips fall where they may. Whatever coach comes in here, he'll get a chance to decide if Shedeur's part of those plans. But that speaks to the people who think like this should be Shedeur's job and he's the easy option. And listen, it might end up being that he is plan A because of where the Browns are drafting and all these different things. But to act like that's for sure going to be the guy under center, I think after hearing those comments, you have to sort of throw that out and block that out of your mind.
My mind goes somewhere else, Spence. My mind goes to Deshaun Watson too, because even that last comment of, hey, the coach is going to have a heavy say in the starter. What coach is going to come in and be like, all right, if it's Clint, let's say it's Clint Kubiak. He comes in, he goes, all right, I'll take this job, and Deshaun's not going to, play for me, or whatever it may be. Like, how much do they factor that part into it as well, Deshaun and Shedeur, for obviously different reasons. But I think that part is kind of eye-opening to me, for a group that has been very, like we talked about earlier, behind closed doors, didn't really show you how the ingredients were made, and then just throw a team out on the field. It's kind of cool to see that, hey, he's going to let the new head coach have an opinion and hopefully take that opinion and then let them go from there and not have any built-in agendas on anybody.
Since you mentioned Deshaun here, Andrew also had a question asked about that. And he said, we were very pleased with Deshaun, with how Deshaun went through and attacked his rehab this past year, how engaged he was with the team, what he did in the meeting rooms. Very pleased with the progress he made in that regard. Look, I can never predict the future, but right now we do anticipate him being part of the team in 2026, but we have a long way to go before we get to that point with any player. So similar sort of thing, confirming that he's probably part of their quarterback room next year, because financially we know it's very cost prohibitive to cut him right now, but leaving the door open for, like, you never know. Sometimes things change and maybe we would try to part ways, and that would probably look like them June 1sting him and then splitting the difference between the contract that's left. So, but yeah, like I think all those options are on the table. But what's important to me here is he wasn't committing one way or another to Shador's our guy or Deshaun's our guy. It's this. We're going to figure this out as we go, and the coach is going to have a big say in that. And I think that's what people need. That's the lasting comment as far as the quarterback situation is concerned that I think people need to remember as you try to figure out this offseason, like what they should do at that position.
Yeah, it's really good. I think it's great perspective by you. It's something really good to and honestly refreshing too, because the quarterback position this year was a disaster from start to finish for all of the reasons. When Joe was playing, it sucked. When Kenny wasn't playing, but when Dylan was in, it sucked. When Shador was in, it sucked. Like everybody you looked, and that points to the coach as well. But like every time, they went to a new guy, it was bad. And that just, you can't do that, man. You can't convince this. You can't trick this locker room anymore than you already had to try.
I know we talked post game too. Like I found it interesting that Shador Sanders basically played his worst game since he took over as the starter on Sunday, but he gave you the moment that anyone's going to remember, which is, hey, I led you into a game-winning drive and we win the football game. And that's like the lasting image that people have of him, which is why it'll be debated this offseason whether he should be the guy.
And truth be told, like that's a real, like, that sometimes is real quarterback play. Like go back a week and Aaron Rodgers played horrible for 58 minutes and then had the Steelers on 1st and goal from the 9-yard line and decided to make it honestly like very similar thing of like, hey, he played like shit. Excuse me, I'm sorry, but played terrible. And then goes on this final drive to go.
Video is not made for kids. We can just check that box.
Yeah, there we go. And then imagine if he throws it to Kenneth Gainwell and they go for 2 and they win the game and they go to the playoffs. Like having a bad game as a quarterback, that's a real thing. But like he keeps stacking a couple of them.
Yeah.
Clutch moments, like that's when quarterbacks got to show up. He did that. I'm not going to sit here and say he's good or the right answer long term, but like he's got some of that it factor to him, and that's no surprise to anybody. It's going to be a fascinating conversation as this continues.
Well, we will certainly have it on this show throughout the offseason and debate what quarterbacks make sense, what options what other options are out there for the Browns as well. I think it's fitting that we end on. I think this is it's a positive, but also sort of
bittersweet.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's a bittersweet sort of moment here. Joel Bitonio, understanding that it could have been his last game on Sunday, was asked to kind of reflect on his 12-year career with the Cleveland Browns.
Make sure
get your tissues. Yeah, I was going to say, get your tissues ready.
If this is the end, how do you look back on your 12-year career?
With great pride. It's hard to put into words. I just try to give it everything. So it's tough, you try and go out there and be the best version of yourself and do what you can to help the team win, and I try to do that every day. That's what I did.
Dude. Tearjerker, man. Tearjerker. You feel for Joel because listen, he had a little bit more success than Joe Thomas got to experience, right? Like he got to the playoffs a couple times. Joe never had that. But like that's a guy who, and you can see it in the emotions he showed there, loves football and loves the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah.
And that's what's cool about it, right? Is the idea that like this guy, and Shelby Harris said it, I think last week, Joe Bitonio is the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah.
And at least for this era of Browns football. And like it was tough to wrap your head around the idea like we might not see Joe Bitonio again because he's been such a staple to this organization. He's been such a good representation for the organization. And if it is his last game, it's been an honor for me to say I've covered him at least for a short period of time here. But I know Browns fans, are going to miss his presence because he really does like ooze what it means to be a Cleveland Brown.
Yeah, that's one of those ones, man. Like he's one of those guys where he's in the class of Joe Thomas, and hopefully, his numbers on the stadium at one point, you know, in the near future. And it's like, man, when you think of the Cleveland Browns, you think of Joe Thomas, you think of Joel Bitonio, and it like those moments right there, like just encapsulate like everything like that is good and that's like really tough about the NFL, because you flip a coin and he doesn't end up in Cleveland and he's drafted 10 years ago, and maybe he goes to Dallas, who I'm looking at the 2014 draft class. The first guard was Zach Martin off the board. He was the second guard off the board. Maybe he goes to Dallas and has some more victories and more wins and a more fun career.
Although Dallas hasn't had a lot of success in this span either. So
right, or maybe the Browns don't draft him and he goes. The next guard went. Holy cow, there was not a lot of guards, but maybe he goes somewhere else. The point is like
for him to end up here, and
he ends up in Cleveland in an era where he had to go through 1-15 and 0-16, and he made it to the playoffs in 20. Missed the playoff game in 20, remember, because he had COVID, and then gets back to the playoff. Did he play against Houston?
He did.
He played
against the Chiefs that first year too. He missed. He just missed the one game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Joel is a class act, and
So
I also think about it like this, where it's like Joe Thomas kind of passed the baton to him. Who is he passing the baton to? Because there's not another lineman right now. I mean, Wyatt Teller maybe was going to be that guy, but now his future with the Browns is in jeopardy. Like, I guess maybe it's Miles, but you know, like I don't know who kind of takes that mantle as like the person who just gets it. And I think that's another interesting part to this entire conversation is you lose your coach, your coach is fired. Who's going to be the person that comes in and like reestablishes that mentality that has Joel Bitonio crying, where he's like, it's just an honor to be part of this football team. Like, who's going to make the players feel that? That's all kind of at the root of all this as well. So, you know, it was cool to see Joel react that way, and you could feel what this all kind of means to him for sure.
And him to go out on 2 wins too. Like that part's cool too. And go out on his own terms. Like Joe was escorted out on a torn tricep, right? Where he was done. You know, that's a wrap for him. But like Joel gets to write, you know, he gets to make his own decision on his own time and go out. He hasn't decided this. So he hasn't decided that. But
he did say that who gets hired as the coach will play
you can
a
use
role
context
in his decision.
He wasn't crying last year at this point. Let's just put it that way.
Well, and I think too, like his contract being up makes it a little more finite than it did a year ago. Like he knew if I can come back, like he has to get re-signed if he's going to come back now. There's a lot to it, but certainly feels like this is probably the end for Joe Bitonio. So
but he gets to go out on 2 wins, and you know that part was cool. Miles the other day, you know, after his sack, talking about how this team has been so awesome for him and like all that stuff. Like, you know, like those there's like little things, and it just adds to the frustration of how bad this team is, because you want them to do this. You'd love these videos to be coming after a playoff game, or you'd love it to be that 2023 Jets game again where they can do this in a celebratory way. But fortunately, this is the world we're all too familiar with, and we're back in it again.
That's going to do it for us, the same way that it might be the end for Joel Bitonio in Cleveland. It's the end of this episode.
Hey, you're a pro, brother.
Of the show. I'm okay. I don't know about that. But listen, we're going to have a lot to talk about. I'd like to do another episode later this week and maybe start mapping out like coaching candidates, who we like, who we don't like, get through some of those things. And, you know, I think that's that's kind of the next phase of the conversation, right? So make sure you subscribe to the channel, because when we have that conversation, you're going to want to be part of it. You're going to want to jump in the comment section. You're going to want to hear what we have to say. Browns Roundtable, of course, is our YouTube channel. Also, head to the website. There's the QR code. I knew he was going to do it. Well timed by Megs. He's becoming a pro with this. You scan that code. It takes you to the website. We got our community section down at the bottom. You can chime in there with like all sorts of topics. If you have a question or you have a thought about who the Browns' next coach should be, jump in and let us know. But also read our written content at the top of the page. We've got some good stuff there from out in Berea on Monday as the coaching change and all that went down. So be sure to check that out as well. Thank you for coming to hang out with us. Plenty more where this came from. Make sure you keep on following along, as always, with all things Cleveland Browns with Browns Roundtable.